Shrink Wrap is the second episode of the third season of Frasier, and this is directed by David Lee, and there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some things that I liked. This isn't one of my favourite episodes. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing bad about it. I just don't find it to be that interesting, and I don't really find it to be very funny. There are moments, of course, but compared to most other Frasier episodes, it just isn't quite the same quality for me. And I think also part of the reason why I don't love it is because a lot of it is told in flashbacks, which works very well. It's very well edited. And the pacing going back and forth as well is really good. We spend a good amount of time in the present and then we spend a reasonable amount of time in the flashbacks. So no actual complaints there, but just down to personal preference. I've mentioned this in a lot of other contexts. I just generally don't like stories that rely on flashbacks. It starts off in a rather fun way. Niles is in therapy. And it's clear that this is some kind of couples therapy. And for about 5 or 10 seconds, we are allowed to assume that he's in therapy with Maris. And then the camera pans to reveal that actually it's Frasier. And I have to say, I love the therapist. I think the couples therapist in this is actually really entertaining. He's played by Milo, and I rather enjoyed that character in this. And we learn that something has happened that's led to Niles and Frasier bickering, to put it mildly. And then we get the flashbacks of the events that led up to this. And it turns out that they both had this idea to go into business together because Frasier is kind of missing the fact that he doesn't get to really dig deep with the callers at KCL. And Niles mentions that somebody in his building where he works is not renewing their lease. Their lease is up. He suggests Frasier takes up that space and they decide to go into business together. And it seems like a great idea. Well, not to Martin. I loved Martin's response, particularly his reference to the restaurant, which was in an episode not that long ago. A brilliant episode. And Martin's response there was just fantastic. We then see Frasier moving into the space with some great remarks from Daphne, who has been roped into helping out. And it's great to see Frasier in Niles' domain. We do occasionally see Niles going down to KCL, but obviously we don't really see Frasier in Niles' place of work. So it's really nice that Niles is the one who's familiar with the space and Frasier is the one who has to do some learning and familiarizing himself. And I think that was really interesting and really nice to see Niles in that, I don't want to say more superior role, but certainly more knowledgeable role with regards to the situation. And then things get intense. Certainly awkward with an increasing intensity as they argue about a plant. And then they have a group therapy session, and it's very clear that they don't see eye to eye on everything. And this is not new information. They both have very different approaches to therapy. They both believe in different schools of therapy. So this is not unexpected as such, but certainly I feel like both of them were acting rather unprofessionally in that situation, and then they start shouting at each other and screaming at each other, and this then leads them on to the couples therapy, as it actually is. And I enjoyed those scenes a lot. Not just because I'm not a fan of flashbacks, but I do, as I said, I think the therapist was a really interesting character, and I just thought those scenes were really brilliant. And the trust exercise, I loved how that played out. It didn't go, I think, the way I expected. I couldn't remember what happened from the first time I saw this episode, so that was very funny. As I said, I don't think this is the funniest episode. I didn't laugh that often, but there were moments. There were definitely moments that were quite funny. In fact, something else I loved was at the very, very end, at the final scene, where Daphne is once again roped into moving things, and just, I thought Jane Leeves' performance for those 4 seconds or something were brilliant. So it's a good episode. I enjoyed it. I always love seeing Niles and Frasier interacting, but it's definitely not as good as a lot of other Frasier episodes. I don't know if that's a popular opinion. I haven't read any other reviews online. For all I know, maybe other people absolutely love it, and if that's the case, that's fine. I think it is largely down to personal preference rather than it being a bad episode, because it's not. It's not a bad episode at all. I wouldn't skip it, put it that way. If I was binge watching this season, I certainly wouldn't skip it. But if I were to actively seek out an episode of Frasier, I think Shrink Wrap would not be anywhere near the top of that list. Not a personal favourite, but still not a bad episode.